topics, emotional moments that you've experienced. This goes beyond systems. It goes beyond, what's your favorite module. It goes beyond, what's some general advice. What are some genuinely good moments that y'all have had with your players that really stick out to you as far as, what you've experienced on your actual plays? I know for us, there's been a few really intense emotional moments. Mostly, I say the majority revolve around the interactions that the characters have with their extended family and the deities and the cosmic war that they're involved with, as far as these big world-moving choices that they've had to make. But really, the most intense emotional moment was much smaller in scope. It was beyond the cosmic war, beyond Vecna versus the Eldritch Horror of Minogra. It was beyond the gods of Faerun and their champions. It was our barbarian who serves the Raven Queen, whose whole mission was to, or whose whole kind of, not mission, but something that was always in the back of that player's mind and in the back of that character's mind, was that as a child, their wings were ripped off by poachers, by collectors of sort of exotic, godkin creatures. And in the jungles of Chult, in the Wreck of the Star Goddess, they didn't find the Star Goddess crew. They found a group of poachers who had hijacked the ship, and that's why it crashed, because they couldn't figure out how to sail the airship. And it was the same poachers, collectors, and bounty hunters that had ripped off this player's wings. And when, after almost a year of playing, when the party together overcame this obstacle, and you get the slog of combat, as you mentioned, right? Because the D&D slows to a crawl, especially 5e, when you're in combat. After the combat, though, when the barbarian, because the way the dice worked, had the opportunity to deliver the killing blow, and there was this flash of energy and blinding lights, and when it faded, her wings had gone from these skeletal wings of the fallen to full feathered wings, and she had been redeemed by the Raven Queen by obtaining her vengeance, and it was raining raven feathers, and the player was just in tears, streaming down with a close up, and everybody else was like just in silence. That's my personal favorite anecdote. But like moments like that again, and you would think it would have been, maybe with the Paladin of Vecna or the Warlock of Minogra or the champion, the favored bard of Sune, but no, it was just with this barbarian serving the Raven Queen, and then just that slow rain of feathers. It was just this moment where everybody, even the chat, was like, But that's my favorite anecdote. So moments like that, I just really wanted to share that story. So whoever wants to go, big emotional moments and capturing that, what are some of your favorite pivotal stories?
I can go first.
You go first, please.
Please do.
So God, I feel like every time I hop into a game or I start a game, it's just you don't know exactly what you're gonna get. I have two examples for you, one from D&D, one from Monster of the Week. The one from D&D would be the campaign that I DM. Um, it is in Wildmount, so it's from Exandria. Everyone knows it. If you're a fan of Critical Role and all that, it started as a one shot from the Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, and eventually just turned into a homebrew thing. So part of the one shot that we were running was that there was a pirate captain named Three Earrings, a tabaxi, who, for better or for worse, was attempting to snag this very precious magic weapon in order to gain some money. But there was no real reason for it other than them being a pirate. So I wrote in that she had a daughter that she was keeping secret from the world, hidden away in Nicodranus. And as per what was happening with the story, the players eventually had to go and seek out this daughter to get an alibi for Three Earrings, as she was being accused of murder when in actuality she hadn't done anything. But she had been framed, and as such, they needed an alibi. So they reached out to her daughter Avalon and set up a meeting to get some information, and found out that she was just as feisty and as wholehearted as her mother, but couldn't really do much from where she was. She'd essentially been like stunted in her acceptance into the world. So one of the players, a cleric, in the moment of her trying to pour her heart out to them and say, "I want to help, but my hands are shackled here. I can't even leave my house," performed the ceremony of coming of age to help her like bolster her spirits, to help her recognize that she could do more. Um, and as such, she like injected herself into the narrative and even stowed herself away on the ship as they attempted to go fight the big bad over in Darktow. But had they not done that, had they not tried to convince her that she was worth more than just being the secret daughter of a pirate captain of the Revelry, um, she would have just been kind of another narrative hump for them to get over. But it was the music that was playing at the time was very heart wrenching. Uh, just the whole scenario. I'm bad at explaining exactly what happened. But it was a very it was just a beautiful scene. It was
Yeah.
lovely. And I'll very quickly go through the second one. It was when we were playing Monster of the Week. I was playing the Summoned, someone who was created in order to help bring upon the apocalypse, and then our friend Sarah uh, was playing the Wronged, or someone who was also trying to help stop whatever was happening. Part of her story is that she had a specific monster in which fueled the fire into becoming a hunter, essentially. And the character that I was playing was that exact monster, not the exact one that wronged her, but the same species. And as such, they had multiple head to head conversations and little quips here and there, but eventually it led to the point where uh, my character accidentally brought upon the apocalypse, had no intention of doing so. But as per the system and as per her using her luck points in order to guarantee the success of a certain maneuver, uh, just, happened to bring upon one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse into existence. So uh, her character could not forgive mine. And as such, they had a bit of a duel in the sense of my character just throwing her hands up and saying, "Please forgive me, I didn't mean to do this," and her character attempting to beat the ever loving shit out of mine. um it ended up being a bit of a cathartic moment
Mhm.
of acceptance and forgiveness, and understanding that that sometimes you're put on a certain path in life that you can't quite control, that it's kind of part of your destiny, and it can and will hurt people if you don't pay close attention to exactly what you're doing. So it brought the two characters together in a moment of, please don't ever fucking do that again, but
Yeah.
let's let's hash this out so that we can get the job done. um yeah, those are mine.
Welcome to the wonderful world of TTRPGs, everybody, where triggering the apocalypse is either one bad dice roll or one questionable decision away from happening
Hmm. Absolutely.
at the snap of a finger. There's so many triggering the apocalypse stories in TTRPGs. It's like being on that epic scale is what makes it makes all the memes, and it makes also all the best moments as well. And you mentioned the music cues. It's been a lot harder with DMCA, but when I'm not preparing for a podcast, or when I'm not preparing for an actual play, or when I'm not at the actually when I am at the day job, sometimes I'll do a lot of D&D prep. So moments when I'm not actually preparing for the game, I'm still preparing for the game by listening to playlists on playlists and playlists of royalty free music, which there's a lot of stuff that's not so great, but there is also these hidden gems that are really really great. And the DMCA has been uh, it's been both difficult and also has had the ability for us to make friends and network with other smaller content creators and really expand our network and do a lot more collaboration than we had opportunities to do before, because we're communicating directly with emailing, doing these business exchanges that are friendly and networking with these smaller creators who are kind of in the same boat that we are. And though it's disappointing to not be able to just pull your favorite song from, or your favorite track from Howard Shore or any other film composers. It's definitely, I think, made the community stronger in a way to try and find this music. But yeah, music is immensely important. Having the right music for a scene is something that it's an art. And I have spent, I don't know how many hundreds of hours just trying to find the right music for the right moment, whether it's in a home game or whether it's in an actual play. But just a funny story, because I am that XP to level 3 meme about the person who always quotes the extended edition of Lord of the Rings. But but there's a great quote from the extended edition behind the scenes where Elijah Wood was watching one of the cuts of the last scene in Return of the King, and asked the editor, "Hey, where are those flashing lights coming from?" When they're in Mount Doom and there's those white flashing lights, and the editor said, or the lighting artist, it was one of the two, said same place where the music comes from. And I thought that was a really great. So it's music or lighting or subtle effects like costuming or anything technical. These little tiny things can just make that moment so much more intense. So, Conri, favorite moment? Go ahead.
All right. Ooh. Some of them, some of my favorites, I have to immediately skip over because they are insanely spoilery for anybody who wants to watch any of the shows. We tend to. I don't have apocalypse stories so much because our games tend to not run on that scale. I like cosmic horror though, things that will that make people question their existence to a level. So one of my favorites came at the conclusion, and as the forever DM slash forever storyteller, erasing two characters from existence wholly was probably the biggest thing. They engaged with something that they didn't understand, and it infected them with something that ate away at their literal existence. So I had to do the epilogue as though they didn't exist.
Whoa.
Um,
So cool. Sorry, that's amazing.
they as though
That's pretty great.
so the group was four, and the entire epilogue was me pretending like those two characters didn't exist while they sat there listening to it. So, but they had a beautiful moment leading into that where they were together in their eternal cosmic annihilation, that but it didn't affect, it wasn't an apocalypse, it was their apocalypse, their moment of ceasing to be, that and then having to go to the other players and explain to them that it hasn't been the four of you, it's only been the two of you this whole time. Everything is explained away, chance, luck. This could have happened at any point in your life as you live it. Like I, it was it was fucked up narrative gaslighting. I realize if you actually like think about it. But the way it played out, that everybody got to experience everything, and from a table perspective, we were all able to process it and be fully aware of what was happening, and are able to retell the story in the full context. But from the perspective of those characters, they literally got gaslit by reality
Yeah.
in what happened. And that was in a Werewolf, the Forsaken game that was set in a Warriors 1970s New York style, like the Warriors, like that movie.
Nice.
That was kind of the inspiration.
It's a great
Finding
movie.
out like I like character moments that aren't driven around a big combat, that aren't driven around a big moment in terms of like the apocalypse fight, like that kind of stuff. That's those moments can be super intense. The moments that are very small, that are super personal, are the ones that we've had to be the most effective. Another Chronicles game I ran, I had the entire and this is a big spoiler for one of our stories. I realize that this is the only one I'm going to do, but to give you an idea of potential of what you can do with this, it was a Mortals game, and they were all part of a recovery group, like a therapy circle that was dealing with people who claimed to have supernatural um, encounters and how to process that. And it all devolved into this like madhouse kind of like the place where they were meeting ended up becoming almost Escher like.
Ooh.
They were now confronting supernatural things directly in front of them. They were tormented by different beasts and creatures and things out of a horror movie. It was a very slasher style
Yeah.
experience. They were chased by a guy with a baseball bat covered in blood, who looked like he just walked off the like a Letterman jacket kind of look. There was a Wendigo that was chasing them at one point. Um, there was a giant golem that was seeping fluid of that smelled of mint, petrichor, and rot. And that was what was stalking them through the
Yeah.
halls. And
The Yankee Candle.
it eventually all resolved finding out that the players were hunting themselves because
Oh.
the players died, and then it zoomed out to show that the antagonists were just reflections. If you're familiar with Changeling,
Yeah.
the players were fetches that whole time,
Nice.
and the changelings were hunting and killing their replacements in reality. And then they proceeded to immediately go on to playing those characters in the next game, and they didn't know I had that planned. It was a very intense story, and having to have them be hunted down and killed by their own monsters that they were portraying in a narrative backwards sense.
I love it.
Watch a lot of really complex, like go watch Memento, and then really think about how to fuck with the story to make your players go like, what is happening? And that's what I found to have the most like punch
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
in a story.
I've done 100%. I've done a couple things like that. I really like the Escher reference because we were talking about the Labyrinth briefly in our community server, and one of my favorite gifts from the Labyrinth is when David Bowie just goes like face forward down into the
Walks off
labyrinth.
off
Yeah,
the
it just
cliff.
walks off that way. Having something like that being chased by monsters of your own creation in that scenario is seems terrifying, and I'm really excited about that concept.
It was it was the original person using their own greatest fear against their
Yeah.
copy to kill themselves to then reclaim their existence within reality. All of those things came together for a string of emotional contemplation. It's very yeah, Lynchian, if you really get down to it.
One of
Those are the moments that I yearn for.
No, and I love also not only eldritch horror but sort of surreal horror and things that really kind of messing with the fourth wall. I like sort of multiverse stuff, things akin to that, or Escher like labyrinths where you're wizard mage mazes, things like that are some of my personal favorites. So I really want to watch that now. So we'll have to talk more about that because that sounds incredible. But just a quick little anecdote. One of our home games, same thing. I was trying to. One of our players, they were in Thay, in one of our home games. And they were like, I want to go up to the top floor of the library in Thay, because all the wizards were like, don't go to the top floor. Like, you're not powerful enough. Like, there was, I think, a couple of wizards up there meditating, and it was an archmage. And they were like, that's a big deal. You don't want to go up there. And our bard was like, I want to go up there. And they're like, you don't. And she's like, I do. So she went up there. I had her make a wisdom saving throw like 3 different times. She ended up failing. And they were like, you're going to see things. You're going to see things you're not ready for. And I basically showed her some of the larger things that were going on in the multiverse, but because she went literally all the way to the top and touched the apex and just started reading books on multiverse theory, when she was kind of sucked into this top level, which was connected to the astral sea and the ethereal planes, I eventually had it end as sort of her seeing all these things, and her in sort of an empty room looking into a mirror, just a room of blackness. She walked up to the mirror, and I was like, you see in your reflection as it comes into focus the mirror image of yourself, but not of your character. You see the descriptive image of you as the player, and then you snap back to reality and fall unconscious for 3 hours, 24 hours. And the player was like, I gotta go, and got up and walked away from the table. But yeah, things like that surreal horror I love, and that was a moment where they were like, to see the actual mind blown there was pretty great. But favorite anecdote, switching now in our wonderful segues over to Kelly. So favorite
So,
moment, story, etc.
so for dramatic emotional moments, I'm gonna cheat and say basically anything from our Mage the Ascent of the Victorian era game, because it's just all drama from like the very first moment, which is just has been phenomenal. But I think the long running one that really jumps out at me is in our homebrew game that's pretty much existed the entire length of the channel. The entire point of our first D&D game was it was improv. Everything was improv from the moment it started, and it was, if something is introduced through improvisational play that does not contradict in an unfixable way something that had been previously established, it became canon. So the entire game was improv from the get-go, and like that's how we did our world building. And midway through, I think like the 5th episode, I decided to introduce the Lilu from Fifth Element style character, the ancient being in the young body who has like and then like the Born Yesterday approach, right? The phenomenal cosmic power in the body of a young girl. I was supposed to be like a one-shot NPC who like gave him a couple magic items, and then vanished. Except that the party, of course, immediately adopted this character and made them the 5th party member, and the character stayed with for 3 seasons of growth. Her backstory kind of became like the backbone of the arcing narrative about this whole like previous war between gods and dragons, and of course her being a humanoid dragon. I guess it's the whole thing. And then at the end of season 3, other characters have been introduced, including another one of her race, which has been pretty much destroyed throughout that grand backstory. And he's kind of sketchy. Like he's basically like a red humanoid dragon counterpart to her gold, and has kind of shown up several times through some terrorist activities against elves, to subtle threats about reclaiming power, and is very much kind of a bad boy in a leather jacket kind of vibe. And at the end of season 3, he invites her to basically like go off with him to try to figure out what happened in their shared obscured backstory that thousands of years of history have forgotten, which culminated in a season finale that wasn't fighting monsters. It was a breakup episode that lasted for almost 4 hours of crying, and it was just amazing to see the development of this person that all of the characters fell in love with, saying, hey, I gotta go off and pursue my own path. And the entire party melted down. In fact, the next 2 episodes of the game I think they're actually a little hard to watch, and I don't love that, but you can see all of the players and their characters processing the breakup of that integral party element. And like the next episode like was shot weeks or months later, and the characters are still having like processed trauma. One of them was having a burgeoning love affair that was starting to blossom with this character, and he's super whiny and twitchy and teenage boy about the whole thing. And just watching the repercussions of
Twilight.
emotional situation. It's very Twilight. It's
Yeah.
very Twilight, but like in a really wholesome way, right? And just watching the heartbreak in that scene was so good. Besides that, like anytime in other games where true conflict develops between the characters, is always my favorite. There is, I still get like, I just got a comment the other day on one of our YouTube videos from Rime of the Frost Maiden, where there was a big party fallout where like the party basically just dissolved because of this horrible thing that happened. in the Cave of the Berserkers, if you know what that is. And I still get comments that are like, I can't stop crying when I watch this episode. Like just new people who are watching the stream. Like, I can't stop crying. I'm screaming at my TV. I'm like, good.
Yes, exactly.
I
You
love it.
want to elicit those responses for sure. That's a
if,
good thing.
if I could add something very quickly to
Absolutely, yeah.
that,
This
the
is
w-
freeform.
if anybody's curious on how to make these kinds of things happen, um, if you're brand new to it and you aren't like if you aren't well versed in telling stories, like, it is a skill that you have to build up over time. It is something that you learn to do. It's a muscle you flex. If you are still new to it, find out what your players want to engage with, and also from a player's perspective, leave shit open. Let your give your DM the knife, so to speak. Like, I don't know where my parents are. Like, those kinds of setups, those moments where it's you create something for to show back up. And if your DM is playing into that, steering into that, you've set up your own. You've prepared your petard to hoist yourself by it, and
I love that. I love that expression. I'm gonna use that now. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Give your DMs bullet points more than paragraphs or like
Mhm.
pages.
Yeah.
Because one of the techniques that I really love to use is the flashback, where like someone will be like, "Oh, I had a fight with my mom and then I ran away from home." I'm like, "Okay, great." Like 5 or 6 games in, we start game with that scene. So we get to tell each other like what is going. And by that point, I know the character well enough and the way the player is playing them, I know how to push their buttons to make that fight worth it. Rather than just, oh, it was a fight. But then the audience gets to see it, the other players get to see it, and the character then has that stain that was role played. Whereas if you start the game with that necessarily, you don't always have the knowledge of who you're playing and how you're playing them to really get the full gravitas of that fight. Flashbacks are so good.
I also tend to abuse dream sequences a lot. Is
Nice.
but everybody seems to really enjoy them. It's like a one-on-one moment. But I have them have actual in-game consequences. Like, I think one of our most intense moments, we have 2 home games and our actual play live stream, and they all connect. They're all taking place on the same timeline at the same time at the same world in our community Discord server. So whenever something happens in the live stream that affects the other games, I'm always, stirring the pot and letting people know, like, hey, there's other things going on. But part of this overarching story, as I mentioned, the cosmic war. I take a lot of inspiration. I like big sort of World of Warcraft level. I know somebody mentioned World of Warcraft before with their Blizzard account, but I really, for all the problems that Blizzard has had, it's a whole other. It's like a whole other 3-hour conversation. The cosmology of World of Warcraft is my number one favorite cosmology out of all the cosmologies that exist. I am absolutely in love with the World of Warcraft cosmology, where you have death and life, you have undeath, you have the Fel, which are fiends, and you have devils versus demons, you have undeath versus life, and then you have light and shadow, and all of these individual entities are playing for these big universe changing goals. So kind of pull that into D&D, but inserted characters like Vecna, and then inserted things like eldritch horrors in place of the void. And Vecna is essentially like the cosmic version of the Lich King. But I don't believe in stereotypical mustache twirling villains, but to an extreme. So I kind of just do away with alignment almost entirely. So we're in a situation now where the players are kind of torn between, oh my god, do we support Vecna? Do we support the Eldritch Horrors? Like, what's going to be, like, what's the greater good? Now we've got a Kerrigan type of character who we killed and now has been able to take control of part of the Eldritch Horrors. So maybe we have an alternative to Vecna. And then Bahamut is coming down and saying, we need to get rid of all of this extra stuff and focus on ourselves. But even Bahamut is kind of morally gray. Like, Bahamut's whole thing is, maybe we have to look at the yin yang now and sort of mixing light and darkness together to form a more perfect world. But in this big cosmic, cosmology, having our warlock, who is the servant of Minogra, Google that if you're not familiar. A very obscure eldritch horror, recent creation, kind of like the extended HP Lovecraft multiverse. The queen of the deeps, queen of tentacles, sex, murder, and power are like her domains. This player is a servant of Minogra, and everybody had kind of been gravitating towards Vecna, which I was kind of surprised about, but in making sort of a morally gray, sympathetic version of Vecna, who we call Vecna the Enlightened, or Vecna the Inevitable, who has lived in undeath through the Critical Role campaign 1, so has already lived that life, has already lived that version of himself, has lived through previous versions of first, second, third, and fourth editions of D&D, and is now returned as like this enlightened individual. It's like, hey, we've got the Eldritch Horrors are coming to turn your planet into a writhing mass of tentacles and flesh and enslave you all. I'm here to help. You need to let me drop a colony on Cormyr so I can have the start of my army. Which they did, because Cormyr was fighting the Centaurum, and it's an evil campaign, and they're all Centaurum characters. So in this dream sequence, I had the Eldritch Horror character who was kind of losing. Everybody was gravitating towards Vecna. I kept leaving clues in these dream sequences to like find these obelisks, and eventually it led them to a repurposed obelisk, because I don't like the WotC obelisks. I made them my own creation. I still kept all the stuff that's there, but I had them be sort of creations of the Eldritch Horrors from thousands of years ago. Very World of Warcraft, like, right, with the old gods. So I had this series of dream sequences leading this warlock to this obelisk outside of the tomb, and they broke away from the party at like 3 o'clock in the morning, flew there themselves, fought a servant of Vecna, destroyed in a one-on-one fight on stream that servant of Vecna, activated the obelisk, and now one of 6 obelisks that is going to power up this eldritch being has been activated, but the old school version of the obelisk. So setting up this chain of dream sequences that's been going on for an entire year, and having it culminate in that character finding it, breaking away from the party, betraying their friend who was the paladin of Vecna, because they both had like these ideas about what to do with this obelisk, whereas the paladin of Vecna was like, you need to destroy this or not touch it. They went there in the wee hours of the morning, touched it, powered up themselves, powered up their god, grew a pair of skeletal wings like Kerrigan, and through again this long chain of dream sequences, was able to actually have this really badass in-game reward for getting their wings and unlocking like a special like homebrew ability. So I think everybody's had a chance to talk about their favorite moments